everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And we are really excited today. This is a bonus episode that we are doing where we are taking a look at our good friend Sandy Sadu's new show where she plays a nurse. It's actually a show called Nurses. And we just thought it would be really fun to look at the first two episodes, basically like a pilot review. And you have to bear with me. I'm a little bit under the weather today, but I'm film critic Rachel Wagner, and I am joined today by a very good friend of mine, new to the podcast, that is a nurse herself. So I thought this would be a perfect time to welcome my friend Jen Mills to the podcast. And Jen, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. You yourself are a nurse practitioner currently. Is that correct?
That's correct. I was a nurse for 12 years, bedside nurse for 10 years. And then for the last 2.5 years, I've been a nurse practitioner. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. And so you not only are a medical professional, but you're also a big fan of medical dramas. Is that correct?
Yes. I know I have a lot of friends who can't handle watching them because they get caught up in the mistakes or the things that they're like, that would never happen. But I personally love the drama. I just love all of it. I kind of wish my hospital was more like Grey's Anatomy, but I mean, not enough hot dogs, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. Would you say that's the biggest thing that these shows always get wrong is all the inner office?
Yes. Like, I mean, there's rumors from like years ago that there's been some nurse-doctor hookups, and there are a couple of docs that I know of who have married nurses from the unit, but it's not as prevalent as you might think. I know I personally work in the NICU, so there's more women than men, and the doctors that we have literally are old. But I know that down in the ED and the OR, there's a little bit more fraternization, but not to the extent that you see on TV at all. And and not everybody's like beautiful people. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
it's a little different.
Well, all that time probably spent spent working. Probably it takes away time that you could spend at the gym probably.
Right. Exactly. And when you're on a 12-hour shift, like day or night, by the end of it, you just feel so tired and exhausted that the thought of like trying to hook up with someone is like completely out of the question.
Yeah. I mean, I always felt that that ER did a better job than most of the other ones as far as being accurate. Is that true?
So I will agree. I actually am doing a deep dive rewatch of ER. I never miss an episode, and I'm rewatching it. And I have to agree that they do a really good job. I think Grey's does a lot more of the what if this could happen, like when they had an artificial placenta, like where, yes, they are working on that. I've been to presentations about it, but it's not anything that is actually working yet. Mm-hmm. So I feel like they're a little bit out there, and ER was more real life. Grounded. This is what you see and this is what you do. Exactly. Definitely more grounded for sure.
Well, and the thing that always impressed me about ER is that they kept the quality up through so many different casts.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like better than any other show that I can think of that they just had, revolving casts. And yet it's still, I mean, maybe because it is a hospital environment, it kind of allows that as opposed to obviously other shows that are like Families or something like that, where you can't really have casting changes.
Right. It's that's what's so real about it is that you might have a few attendings that stay, but you've got so many residents, nurses, fellows that rotate through that your job environment can be very different every 3 to 4 years.
Yeah. Well, and what actually is the difference between a nurse practitioner and a nurse? Like, obviously you need more education, but what is the specifics there between that?
So a nurse practitioner, and this is interesting because there's a nurse practitioner that they feature on The Resident. It's on Fox. Mm-hmm. And they still call her nurse, which she's not. She's a nurse practitioner. I personally had to get a doctorate, so I actually am a doctor.
Oh, okay.
Doctor of nursing practice. But what we do is we actually have our own patients that we write orders on, and we are in charge of the medical management of that patient. Whereas for bedside nursing, you receive the orders from the practitioner or from the doctor, and then you're carrying out those orders, and your job is to constantly be assessing those patients and then letting the practitioners know what's going on so they can therefore make the decisions they need to make as far as the health care that they need.
Yeah.
We really, like, we're at the bedside for just like sometimes a few minutes, or if a kid's sicker, we might be there for a few hours, but the nurses really are the eyes and ears of the unit, and they're what keep it running.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like there is a tension or difficulty between like the doctors and the nurses, or is that kind of played up for drama?
So I think that is kind of played up for drama. I know I work at a children's hospital, and I feel like not just in my unit, but in talking with other friends that I have that work in other units, there's definitely more of a collaboration. It's more of a team effort.
Yeah.
But there are definitely some doctors that are harder on people than others. Like
Sure.
I had one doctor that scared me to death, still scares me. Luckily she left. But she would just look at you like you were a complete idiot.
Mm-hmm.
And that really like affects how you can communicate, and you need to have good open communication between your nursing staff and your physicians.
Mm-hmm.
So, and she's not the only one. There's been others that are a little bit rougher to deal with. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think the drama is definitely played up more, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
a lie. It really does happen.
Do you think that the whole idea of nursing being for women is changing, or that's still pretty prevalent?
I think it's still pretty prevalent. We always joke around about like having the token guy in the class or whatever. My class, there were 50 of us in my nursing graduating class, and there were 10 guys, which
Mm-hmm.
actually was pretty good,
Yeah.
but it definitely is still more of a female driven profession. Also, it seems like the males tend to move on to go into nurse practitioner school or nurse anesthetist school. And
Mm-hmm.
that's usually because they of the traditional roles of the man as the provider, and they want to be able to make more money.
Mm-hmm.
As nurses, we can make pretty good money. Like it's pretty decent. It can, $60,000 a year or whatever. But usually the men, it seems like they want to move on. We only have a couple of men in our unit that have stayed as bedside
Mm-hmm.
nurses.
Interesting. Very interesting. So so this nurses show,
Yes.
this is for global TV. So it's only in Canada right now, but hopefully we'll be able to get it on in America as well.
Hopefully. I just want to see what's going to happen.
I know.
I'm sucked in.
We were lucky enough to get some screener links for this review. But how did you feel overall about the 2 episodes? Did you feel like it was a pretty good start, or? Yeah.
I felt like it was a pretty good start. I felt like the initial the premiere episode, I felt had a very Grey's Anatomy-esque feeling
Mm-hmm.
to it, with they're all brand new, to the hospital. Grace, the lead, basically, it seems like to me, I mean, she has a year of experience elsewhere, but it seems like the rest of them don't have any experience. And so they're all getting into this and kind of like, what in the world is happening to us? This is so different from school.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like that was definitely very true to life. I feel with all TV shows, I actually feel like the premieres lack a little bit more. I feel like it's not until the second episodes where the cast seems more comfortable with each other, and they kind of get more of a better flow. At least that was my opinion, but I still enjoyed the premiere.
It definitely did. I mean, especially because she has blonde hair, and she's, I don't know, there were a number of things that did feel a little Ellen Pompeo in the lead. Her name is Tira Scoveby, and playing Grace Knight. There's 5 different nurses that are starting, that are the lead characters of the show, with Natasha Collis playing Ashley, Jordan Johnson Hinds playing Keon, Sandy Sadu playing Nazneen Khan, and then Donald McLean Jr. playing Wolf. So those are our 5 nurses. We also have on this show Ryan Hadanaka, who Hallmarkies will know from When Hope Calls. He plays, he has a role on that show
Yes.
here on Hallmark Channel. So hopefully that's not bad news for When Hope Calls. This hasn't been renewed yet. So he plays Gabe on When Hope Calls, and so hopefully that's not been canceled. We'll see.
Seriously, hopefully this isn't a bad omen.
Yeah, he's one of the doctors on this show, and so it starts out. You have Grace as our kind of lead character, and you have them. There's been a shooting, right? There's been a thing, a terrorist event, and it starts out with, you see immediately they end up, Grace gives blood because they're like in need. Is that something that would be common for nurses to actually give blood?
No. So, well, okay. So like at the end, they showed them all like giving blood at the hospital. They actually do have blood drives at the hospital every month, but that's just like a normal thing. It's not like, oh my gosh, there's been a trauma. Can everybody hurry and come and give blood? Because the blood has to be cleansed, irradiated, all this other stuff. It has to go through a different company before we can actually use it. But actually having, like, we do have a monthly Red Cross.
Because I would think you wouldn't want to have all of your staff be depleted of blood at the same time.
Well, yeah, that you might get some people passing out and getting tired. I mean,
yeah. I mean,
plus it's hard to find time. Like,
that's true.
You know, there's not a lot of my coworkers. It seems like it's more like the office staff people, administration that gets to go give blood, because a lot of my coworkers, like, we don't have time to actually be there for the duration of a blood donation.
Yeah, I wondered about that, because, like, I mean, they're already working 12-hour shifts, and now you're taking blood away from them.
Yeah, seriously.
I mean, but yeah. So Grace ends up treating this terrorist guy who's super skeevy, and and Ashley is upset with her about it, and that he shouldn't get the same care as the people that he's just hurt and are suffering. And this to me felt like the weakest plot element of the pilot. I mean, I feel like any medical professional would of course know they have to treat everybody.
Exactly.
What's she supposed to do? Just sit there and let them die? I mean, you can't do that.
Yeah, that would be like, you would get called into the manager's office if you just like flat out refuse to take care of a patient. And, you know, there's some situations, like I've had a situation recently where I was very emotional about a patient that we have on our unit. And so like my colleagues were able to make it so I didn't have that patient on my team. But like, I have had people where I may not agree with the beliefs that they have, or I may know that like they're illegal in the country, or you know, they've been in jail and things like that. I do not treat them any differently than I would treat, you know, the poster child family. Like, you have to just put all of that aside, and you know that going in.
I mean, I feel like you could be held criminally liable, couldn't you? If you just like didn't.
You could, if you just like walked off, if there was no one else to take care of that patient, like you could be, I don't know if it would be criminally, but you would definitely, your job would be put into question.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And we also find out that Ashley seems to know about Grace's past, and she's kind of out for her. And because Grace was just at this other hospital for a year, she was working under this. We find out more in the second episode of what happened to her, and so do you relate to? I mean, obviously, it kind of goes to melodrama in this, but do you relate to that sense of competition between the different your colleagues in that sense?
So I do. There are definitely, and I was actually very competitive myself, and I still remain competitive as far as wanting to get the sickest patients, wanting to be the first one in my group to, you know, take the sickest patients, and to be able to kind of be like the star of our like new grad class.
Uh-huh.
There definitely can be that, and you can tell who those people are. I like look back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I was probably so obnoxious. Like I kind of hate myself for that. But as far as like knowing, like, you know, nurses and stuff from other hospitals, especially in my field in neonatology, it's like such a small world. Like we know people from other units, from like other hospitals, and we do know, sometimes we know like, okay, that person did get fired for this, or this person didn't pass their boards this many times, or things like that. Like we know, like you find out about it. There's like there's definitely a lot of gossip and a lot of, there is kind of that subterfuge thing where like their past, and sometimes it's hard with your coworkers to hold back on not judging. I mean, it's sad to say, but
yeah,
we work with a bunch of women, so
yeah,
you
I'm sure
that kind of that goes on, and it's actually getting better, thank goodness.
So Wolf is assigned to find the man that belongs to the fingers, and I mean it was silly plot, but it was entertaining.
Well, what killed me is I was like, that happened in the first season of Grey's Anatomy. I want to say like the 3rd or 4th episode, but it was actually a chopped off penis.
Oh,
so I was like, this is so like Meredith-esque, as you said earlier, with Meredith carrying around the cooler with the chopped off penis.
Right.
And so it kind of, I thought was like a weaker point, but then it did allow for him to see what his other newbies were doing.
Yeah.
And kind of help bring them in. It
was fun for because I felt like it wasn't taken like super as seriously as the terrorist plot line.
Right. You needed something lighter for sure.
Yeah. And then you have you have this Nazine has the toughest kind of plot line where she has to help there's a man who's a teacher who got injured in the attack, and it turns out he ends up brain dead. And that whole I thought that whole sequence was all done very well and was very sad. And would you ever, you know, her mom, the man's mom brings in food for her. Would you eat something that's brought by a patient, or is that
we have families actually bring in food all the time?
Okay. Yeah. I wondered about that.
Now, one thing, there was one time, this is like NICU lore, but I think it really did happen because I talked to the guy it happened to. The family brought in cookies, and the mom, like he was eating one, and the mom was like, yeah, I made that with my breast milk. So sometimes we're a little cautious about eating homemade food. But yeah, like we'll have people bring in food all the time, and we put it in the break room, and there's always a saying like nurses will eat anything. And that's very true.
It's accurate.
Yeah. Because there's so often where we don't have time to get like a decent lunch or anything, that if there's food sitting there, we'll eat it.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, and I thought that was a really well done. That was my favorite of all the different plot points in this pilot. I thought that Sandy did a really good job trying to comfort this mother, and trying to get the organ donation for the one of the students that he loved. That whole thing, I thought that was good. I liked that.
I agree. It was, and the emotion of it was definitely real. That's real to life for sure. There's some of those patients you just bond with.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then Keon, the other major plot line is he is sent to the labor and delivery ward, or whatever you call, and he is assigned a woman who's there alone. She had a partner, and she ended up becoming pregnant to try to keep the partner invested in the relationship. Anyway, things didn't go well, and so she's there alone, and he's trying to help her, and he ends up finding her emergency contact, which hasn't been updated, which is still the old partner, and he calls her, and she ends up coming. And I don't know, what did you think about this plotline? Did you feel like that was he overstepped, or?
So, like, technically, yes, you could call the emergency contact number for sure, but I think it was a little bit more dramatized than what you made it out to be, because a lot of times you'll get a new emergency contact when the person comes in the hospital. It's not just like as soon as they come in, it's like, okay, who's your next of kin, that kind of thing.
Right.
But I also don't know, like, I myself, like, thinking about that, I'm like, if that didn't go well, I could actually be held accountable
Right.
for breaching HIPAA, which is our it's a law that says that, like, that you cannot give health information. It's Health Information Privacy Act. You can't give information to people without permission.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it's an emergency contact, I don't know that he could call and say, hey, your ex-wife or your ex-partner's here and at labor and delivery. Like, I don't know that you could actually say that. You could say the person's in the hospital, but you couldn't tell them why.
Yeah, I
Or
wondered about
without
that.
literally getting fired. Like, HIPAA violations are no joke.
I mean, and granted, this is in Canada, so we don't know the
That's
laws
true.
there.
That's true. You're absolutely right.
But still, it was definitely a risky effort, because
That's a risky move.
because she could have not responded that well, and
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and then watch the partner, like, now start to, like, try to sue for custody. I was like, this could go down a really bad road.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So yeah, he's been kind of assigned to labor and delivery. Can you just get assigned anywhere in the hospital, or do you have specializations that?
So there's usually you get hired just for one unit and you get trained for that unit, because every unit is so different. But because I thought about that as well, I was like, this doesn't really happen. But then I was like, you know what? If they had a hospital float pool, which is nurses who, like, they want to float to different units, and so they go to different units and help when they might be short staffed, and they get trained in each unit. And so that's the only way that would happen, is if they were float pool. And we love our float pool nurses. Like, they are amazing, and I applaud them for learning all the different units, and they save our butts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then the only other major part of this episode was we find out that our friend Grace is dating an engaged man, or seeing an engaged man. So
Yes.
Scandal.
Such a scandal. I'm like, what's going to happen here?
So
I expected more from you, Grace.
I know. So then we get to episode 2, and it starts out, we find out that Wolf is taking pills. So
yes.
Yeah, so that's going to be I'm sure that's going to be an ongoing problem.
And that is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
There are nurses I've known a couple, and actually a distant family member, who got addicted to pills and, like, taking pain meds from their patients. Mm-hmm. And it's a huge deal. You lose your license when that happens.
Yeah, I would think you could even end up in jail, depending on what.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge problem, the whole opiate epidemic. And so I always, the few times I've gone into surgery, I've always just said, I want like 5 pills. Like,
exactly. Yes, that's very
or under
smart.
10, like, or whatever, depending on what it is. But
yeah,
just a couple days, that's it.
Yeah, which is very smart.
Because you don't even want them around.
No, and there's some doctors who are pretty liberal with what they prescribe.
Yeah.
But the healthcare system I work for is really trying to crack down on that, which I think is good.
That's good. And so then he gets his main plot line is with this punk teenager who has cystic fibrosis.
Yes.
And I don't know a ton about cystic fibrosis, but I learned a little bit through this movie last year that came out, the 5 Feet Apart.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Which was actually, I thought, pretty decent for a like teen weepy.
yeah. I agree. I like that movie.
Yeah, and there's this YouTuber who has CF, and I started watching his reviews because he did a whole a trailer reaction and
Mm-hmm.
everything, and anyway, he talked a lot about he was impressed with a lot of the details that they got right in the movie,
Yes.
and anyway, so I feel like I know a little bit about it, but I don't really. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, especially smoking. That would be crazy.
I know, but honestly, there are some people who are just stupid,
Hmm.
and we get that. We don't get that in the NICU, but when I was in nursing school doing rotations, the fact that sometimes I'd have to walk my patients outside so they could get a smoke break, it's
Hmm.
insane. It's like, smoking is addictive. Just
Yeah,
don't do it.
but just for somebody with a lung condition, you just think,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. In fact, I doubt that she could even be on the transplant list. Well,
No
I think
way.
they actually mentioned it. But I know my dad was on a transplant list and they tested him every single week for drugs. And you can
Mhm.
test for nicotine. So
Sure.
I was like, come on,
Yeah,
they're going to know.
yeah, and it's not like what is it in Fault in Our Stars when he just holds it because then he has the control or whatever. No, she was like
Uh-huh.
smoking. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
yeah,
it was shocking.
yeah. um, and basically we find out that Wolf had leukemia
Hmm.
as a child, and that he has to still take pills
Yes.
that the to avoid recurrence,
Yes.
and that it causes him sometimes to go into debt to other things in order to get the recurrence pills.
Yes.
So there you go about that.
Hmm.
And so there's this big fundraiser uh, at the hospital, and the head of the fundraiser. I'm so bad with these kind of shows. Like I just forget everybody's names, and I'm just like, fundraiser lady.
Yes.
So it's just like, I
I
don't know
can't
her name.
remember her name either.
It's
But yeah.
fundraiser lady. But she passes out, and so then they go and they find out that she has a mass, and it turns out that it's cancer.
Hmm.
And so at first she doesn't want to tell her family because she just wants to be able to enjoy her. She doesn't want to be pressured to do chemo and other
Hmm.
things. And I think it's Grace who is really upset about that.
Yes. Yeah. She ended up being like her primary nurse and was trying to walk her through that process.
Mm-hmm. Because you can't tell for her.
Exactly. Exactly. It's back to those privacy things. I actually had a patient uh, where the mother, like the dad thought that the mom had quit drugs and the mom hadn't, and the baby was positive. And we technically could not tell the dad because they weren't married. We couldn't tell the dad that the baby was positive. And
Oh.
so we had to have our social workers actually, because I was like, I'm the nurse. And what if the dad asks me, like, what's wrong with the baby or why this happened? Like, I can't say anything. And it did feel really awkward. But luckily, as you saw the show, we had a social worker who was able to talk to the mom and just say, you really need to come clean.
Mm-hmm.
And then she eventually did. But that it's so real that there's some things you cannot say. Um, and it makes it really uncomfortable.
So there's also this whole thing during this whole episode of there's the man who is a maintenance man, um,
Yes.
who keeps getting called up to clean because Nazine at a certain point gets throw up all over her,
Yes.
and which I'm sure,
So
especially as a baby, taking care of babies, you get
it
all kinds of
happens. And then,
disgusting.
yeah, and adults. And yeah, I was like, I felt really bad for her.
But she keeps calling for this guy Rick or whatever his name was to come
Hmm.
and clean, and I and so yeah, it turns out that she is from a really rich family, and that she kind of was able to sort of skim by and not know some of those basic things. Uh,
Right.
like she doesn't know how to properly make a bed, which seemed a little bit like, could you really get through all medical school and not know how to make a bed?
Okay, seriously. Well, it was kind of funny because like, I mean, I learned those, like we did those skills like the very first semester of school, because you start out with going to the nursing homes and then you're helping with those things. And I was like, you really like charmed your nursing colleagues to like do your stuff for you? I'm like, no, that would not
Yeah, I kind of wondered.
happen. No. Yeah,
Because
seriously.
do you ever have like, since the does the do the nurses ever kind of get a um little you have this sort of you have this sort of totem pole of they have to, there's the doctors and then the nurses and then there's the people that are underneath the nurses, and
Hmm.
does that ever become kind of a thing? Or it's like,
So it kind of can, like, again, medicine's moving towards like more of a collaboration
yeah,
effort, but you definitely do get some nurses who are like, well, you're a tech, so
right.
this is your job and I'm not doing or
Mhm.
like the housekeepers, like we call them environmental services now. But yeah, there's some people who do treat them like crap, and I'm like, oh no, the fact that they're here cleaning this up means you don't have to, so you treat
Right.
them kindly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean I mean I forget the I've had a number of friends that are the type of nurse that you can get with an associate's degree. I forget what it's called.
Yeah, probably like an LPN,
Yeah,
licensed
yeah.
practical nurse or whatever.
Right.
Yes.
And because that is a hard job.
Yeah,
That is a brutal backbreaking work job.
it really is.
And so yeah, it was interesting. And then we learn more about Keon in this episode,
Hmm.
because a friend of his and his the friend's wife comes in to have a laparoscopic surgery, and
Yes.
she's going to just be removing some PCOS from, and it turns out she needs to have basically like a full hysterectomy.
Right.
And so that's obviously kind of devastating, but the whole time this friend is like, you were so amazing at football, and remember that great game, that incredible play. And it
Hmm.
turns out that in that incredible play, Keon actually paralyzed the other player. And so
Yeah, that was heartbreaking.
yeah, and so to him it's obviously this devastating thing, but then other people see it as this great thing. And so that's why he decided to get into medicine, was to be able to try to make amends for what he's seeing with
Right.
this.
Yeah, which I thought was really, really commendable for his character, for sure.
Hmm. Yes. And so then the other big thing that we learn, so Ashley's just continuing to bother Grace about this whole thing, and about how she got kicked out of the fancy hospital,
Hmm.
working for this doctor. And the big scandal is that she left sponges in a person in an
Yes.
operating room, and that's why she got kicked out of that hospital. But we learn that it was because the doctor was sexually harassing her,
Hmm.
assaulting her. And what did you think about this? Did that feel? I don't know. What did you think about that?
So I think it's a great plot line.
Uh huh.
I also thought it was interesting when she was in assisting with that surgery, um, for the artist's wife. I thought it was interesting because the one surgeon was like, "Oh, you worked under that doctor. We've been trying to get him over here for a while." And so I was like, "Okay, that was some good foreshadowing, especially with the fact that Grace had that issue with him, and was like, oh yeah,
Hmm.
he'll be on in the next few episodes. Don't you worry."
Yeah. Yeah.
But as far as like, I was like, you know what? When you're in surgery, like everyone's sterile, and there's so many people in there that you would see if a doctor was trying to put his hands down someone's pants.
Hmm.
Like that would definitely be seen.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if some kind of harassment was going to happen, it would probably not happen in such a blatant area.
Yeah, I
And then it
wondered
might
about
be,
that.
yeah, it might be somewhere more in private. Because if you think about it, that's where a lot of abuse takes place, is in private.
Yeah.
But the things that we see more often is verbal sexual harassment
Mm-hmm.
rather than actual, like, the physical abuse.
Right.
But this does make for great TV.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and if you left sponges in a patient, would you be able to just go over to another hospital? Would that be, or would it be more serious than that?
So, well, first of all, I've been in many surgeries, like more than I can count, over the last 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, it's not just one person doing the count. There's multiple people doing the count.
Mm.
Like, it goes down the line. And so,
The whole
and if
team would be
the
responsible,
whole
not,
team,
yeah.
yeah, it's not just one person responsible. So I was like, that would be pretty rare to have that happen. It also, there are mistakes that are made in hospitals. We are all human. We've had some pretty devastating things happen that were, at the fault of one of the staff. And I haven't seen anyone get fired. Like, usually it's a time to do further education, to look at how the policies and procedures are, what can we change and make better. It's very rarely like a punitive thing, like you are no longer going to be an employee.
Mm.
Except for HIPAA, like the privacy policies, that is pretty much a one and you're done.
Mm.
So,
Interesting.
but another thing, as far as like laws, at least here in America, hospital, like your employer is not allowed to say why you were fired. That's considered private information. And so they could just not, you may just not get get a recommendation from your previous
Oh, okay.
employer, which is not a good thing.
But
Like, if you, oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
Or I was just gonna say, wouldn't the doctor doing the surgery be held to more a penalty than the nurse?
Um, Honestly, they probably would, but it also crap rolls downhill.
Yeah,
So
right.
they would do the best they could to not be held accountable for that.
Mm-hmm.
And where if she was a scrub nurse, I mean, that is the scrub nurse's responsibility. But yes, at the end of the day, the doctor actually does have to sign off on the counts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, this it was you're not getting introduced to the characters in the same way as in the first episode, but I thought that this was a pretty good second episode. We got
mm-hmm.
to know more about all of our characters, and overall, I feel like the acting is pretty strong in the
I
show.
agree. I agree. There isn't anyone that I was thinking while I was watching it, like, okay, this is not believable.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like they were all they were pretty connected to their characters and
Mhm.
pretty involved, and you could believe the emotions and things that they were going through.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like the writing is pretty solid as well. Um, I overall, I think it's a pretty strong start. I enjoyed watching them, and I'm hopeful we can get more links because I want to
Yeah.
watch the rest and see how it all ends.
So
But
do I. I'm
yeah,
like, there's like so many little plot lines where I'm like, I want to see where that
yeah,
goes.
yeah. And Sandy told me on the interview that they've already renewed it for season 2. So
Oh,
they must have huge confidence in the
they
show.
must.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to actually have a show about nurses. Like, there's been a few sitcoms that have come out that haven't lasted that have been about nurses, but it's been, sitcoms and comedies. And I feel like
Hmm.
there is so much to the nursing role, and there's so much that we see and experience, that it's nice to have something that's not just about the doctors.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, this was really fun. I really enjoyed doing this, and thank you so much. And like I said,
You're welcome.
we're not sure, if we'll cover more maybe at the end of the season, or I don't know. I just don't know what we'll get. But this has been really fun. And I don't know. Do you have social media or anything that you want to share? Or
Um, I'm currently private,
okay, okay,
so
I wasn't
I
sure.
don't have anything on there. I don't share much about my job either, just because
Sure.
it's hard to share things about your job on social media, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'd love to come back.
Yes. Well, let us know if you are listening what you thought of of our analysis. Does it sound interesting to you, or if you got to see it? Let us know what you thought of the show, and yeah, let us know in the comment section or on Twitter. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And thanks so much. This was really fun. You can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So make sure to check that out. And make sure you're following the podcast at Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast all over social media, iTunes, YouTube. And if you're listening on iTunes, please leave us your ratings and reviews. It really helps us out. And if you are listening on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. That really helps us as well. We have our Patreon group, which is really fun, and is you can join for as low as $2 a month. So it's really great. We also have our merch store, which has all things Hallmarkies and Hardee's inspired. So check that out. And thanks again, Jen. This was really fun. I really enjoyed talking about it with you.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully we'll be back.
Yes. Bye, everybody.